Is the gentleman from California, Mr. Kiley.
What's happening in Chicago is a travesty, and unfortunately there are some in the world of politics who would prefer not to talk about what's happening in Chicago, who would have us become almost habituated to the horrifying scale of violence and death going on here. And so I think this is a really important hearing that we're having today to send a loud and clear message that what's happening here should never happen in the United States of America. For that matter, what's happening in Manhattan should never happen in the United States of America. What's happening in LA should never happen in the United States. What's happening in San Francisco should never happen in the United States. San Francisco is one of the most beautiful places on earth, and it's now losing people faster than any major city in U.S. history, largely because of the crime situation there. So there is no doubt that we need to restore proper penalties for criminal conduct, as well as, by the way, restore evidence-based rehabilitation to help offenders turn their lives around. But what is just as important, I believe, is we as a country need to restore the proper respect and admiration for our men and women in law enforcement. Because if you talk to any police chief or sheriff and any community around the country, they will tell you that they are understaffed, that they are having trouble retaining people, they're having trouble recruiting people. Here in Chicago, for example, since 2019, the Chicago force has lost 3,300 officers. They've only replaced about half of them. Lieutenant Garrido, you testified that the force is about 2,000 officers short. Resignations increased by 65% from 2000 to 2021. One former state prosecutor said that morale among law enforcement in Illinois is at an all-time low. But it's not just happening here. A survey from 2023 by the Police Executive Research Forum showed that agencies are losing officers faster than they can hire new ones. And there were nearly 50% more resignations in 2022 than in 2019, such that the total sworn staff has dropped nearly 5% over the last 3 years. In my state of California, the total patrol officers dropped by over 13% over a little more than a decade. That means it dropped from 195 officers per 100,000 residents to just 169, and this level is now the lowest level since at least 1991, which of course means when you have fewer officers patrolling the streets that criminals are able to operate with greater impunity. So Lieutenant Garrido, there are obviously a lot of causes of this problem, in particular the taking tools away from law enforcement officers to do their jobs and the actual defunding of the police. But to what extent is this attributable as well to sort of a hangover of the defund the police movement and the toxic, malicious rhetoric that was directed at law enforcement by certain people in public life?
Oh, this is mission accomplished for the defund the police movement. When I took the exam in 1989 to come on the job, 35,000 people took the test with me. Now they're lucky if they can get 1,500 people to take the test. They're actually, you can walk in the day of and actually take the exam if you just happen to be strolling by and see that there's a test being given. It's extremely difficult to recruit right now. And that's all by and large because of the way that our elected officials, and some would say maybe they don't realize it, but I think they do. They know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly what they're saying. And they're demonizing our officers. And they're making this job not desirable. So nobody wants to come on it. And another significant impact, my father was a Chicago police officer. My uncle was a Chicago police officer. At one time, I know Carlos's father was a Chicago police officer. At one time, parents, they would want their kids to follow in their footsteps. Now there's a huge movement. I don't know anybody that would tell their children to come on the job now.
Yeah,
and that's a big portion. I mean, children of police officers is a large portion of our force, and they're just not doing it anymore.
That's a really important point. And so this message that, our police officers, our men and women in law enforcement are the guardians of our community. While the rest of us run away from danger, they run to danger. Their work is the cornerstone of a civil society, protecting the rule of law. And yet you had all of this rhetoric vilifying police officers that sent precisely the opposite message. So in addition to changing our laws, I think we really need to rededicate ourselves as a country to honoring and celebrating those folks who are in law enforcement enforcement and to have almost a new national campaign dedicated to celebrating law enforcement as an honorable calling, a noble calling, in order to inspire a new generation of young people, including those who are sons and daughters of folks who are in law enforcement now, to want to serve, to see the problems that we're facing in many of our cities and say that in spite of the risks, they want to be part of the solution because it's a function that is so closely tied to the public good. So I think that all of us have a role to play in that. One thing I did is for Police Week, I honored an officer with in different departments within my district, as what we called the Police Honor Roll, and gave them a congressional recognition on the floor of the House of Representatives. For citizens, just thanking officers when you come across them in daily life, I think can go a long way as well. And sort of in that vein, in closing, I'd just like to thank everyone here today, including our two witnesses, of course, for your service to your community and to our country. I yield back.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. That's a great point about the family and the tradition, the legacy that's there, and how that's changing, unfortunately. We have three more members. We have Mr. Fitzgerald, Mr. Gates via Zoom, and then we'll finish with the gentlelady from this great state, Ms. Miller. So Mr. Fitzgerald is recognized for 5 minutes.